We're just hours from the Sixers' Game 5 do-or-die matchup against the New York Knicks, in which they will attempt to climb out of the 3-1 hole and become the 14th team in NBA history to ever accomplish this feat. Now, we got some interesting news that I did want to dive into about the potential future or the role of a key player on the Sixers team, and that is a guy that we've talked about quite a bit in Tobias Harris. So I want to dive into what Keith Pompe wrote and said, as well as some little bit concerning injury updates that we got with the Sixers team ahead of, once again, this must-win matchup. So to start out with, this article from Keith Pompe that dropped initially to start out this morning says, only drastic change can save the Sixers. Tobias Harris off the bench might be the best answer. And the reason that I think this is interesting here specifically is because it is coming from Keith Pompe. And when we think back to the track record, you always have to think when there's reports where they're coming from and why. And generally, this is a leverage play between either a player, an agent, or a team based on the situation. Keith Pompe has very much been the source for a lot of the Tobias Harris outlook throughout the stretch of his tenure in Philadelphia. I think it is fair to correlate at this point in time that the sources that Keith Pompe runs with come from the Tobias Harris camp. And to get a couple examples of this, he wrote just before the playoff starts, Sixers fans want to part with Tobias Harris. They may get their wish this summer. He also was one of the guys at the forefront during the middle of the season when there were the trade speculation of the reports such as Tobias Harris' Sixers tenure is expected to end this offseason per Keith Pompe. This has been going on for several months, and I just want to reinforce that he is a guy that seems to have an ear to that street when it comes to Tobias Harris, which is why I think it's all the more interesting to have this article coming out on the day before or the day of a must-win matchup. So I don't know what the specific angle there, if I want to put on my Galaxy brain, my tinfoil hat, and talk about maybe the Harris camp wants to kind of just point to how the Sixers have not given Tobias Harris a fair shake and how people want him on the bench, and that's going to be their outlook for the offseason. Regardless, and also to speak to Keith's kind of reporting style, he's not a dude who tends to do a ton of opinion-style stuff, that he is much more of the dot connector, the reports, and that is no criticism at all. Keith's definitely not one of these guys that I would throw under the umbrella of doesn't know anything about basketball, and there are guys that I would, but Keith is a guy who's been doing this for a long time, is pretty well respected, so I did think it was interesting for him to put this out specifically here. And I don't have an issue with the context, with the substance of what he's saying. Frankly, I would have loved to have had this conversation months ago in regards to Tobias Harris. But what I do find odd, and why the timing of it I think is especially interesting, is I think there's basically zero chance that the Sixers make that type of move with their season on the line. And I get it. It would be a desperate move. It would be a reactionary move. It would be an adjustment by Nick Nurse. But it just feels like that is the caliber of move that is something that you can't just spring on a team in a must-win game. So I do think it's strange for that to be written now. But who knows? We will see what happens from there. Now, I did want to dive into the injury side of things for this Sixers team. As I mentioned, we all know the situation. Down 3-1, a must-win game. And there is a little bit of concern that they will not be at full strength there. So to dive into this specifically, Lou, and looking at the injuries, we get this update saying that Joel Embiid is not at shoot-around due to a migraine, per Sixers official. Still listed as questionable tonight with the left knee injury recovery. We also got the update that Kelly Oubre Jr. is also not feeling well and is not at shoot-around per a team official. Oubre will be listed as probable for tonight's game. So obviously it is an all-hands-on-deck type of situation for this Sixers team, and you want as many of these guys as close to 100% as you can get. And real quick aside, this Sixers organization just has to get some vitamin C in there, man. The amount of sicknesses that we've seen. We had Tyrese Maxey earlier in this series. We've had Maxey several times throughout the year. Embiid has been sick. What is going on with inside that facility? That just has to be cleaned up. Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But beyond that, we know the situation with Joel Embiid. He's going to play. He's not going to be himself. And for those keeping score at home, this is now a migraine, Bell's palsy, and, of course, whatever's going on with that knee that he's battling. And Embiid has been pretty open that the migraines were one of the first signs of the Bell's palsy showing face, or a little bit of a bad pun there. But his first sign of him having sort of an issue was dealing with these migraines, so I assume that's pretty correlated there. But nonetheless, for anyone who has had a migraine, that is no joke, and we do hope that clears up before he has to go under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden in an attempt to win a game there. Now, I did want to talk a little bit more about the outlook. So we talked about the injury side of things. We talked about this Tobias Harris idea. The other side of the coin for each of these conversations is if you want to make moves, if a guy's not going to be available or you want to make a change, somebody has to step up and replace them. And I'm not sympathetic to Tobias Harris in this regard. To lay out just the facts are the facts here when speaking about a guy that has will be in the conversation for least production per dollar made in the NBA level. We're talking about Tobias Harris, who's the 19th highest paid player in the NBA, making 28.87% of the Sixers salary cap. This is while averaging a career worst 8.3 points in 35.3 minutes per game. I'm not going to be the guy sitting here pushing for him to be benched, but I will be at the forefront for minimizing his minutes. And as I mentioned, that means somebody has to step up and replace them. So to look at the injury report here, or look at the depth chart here, there's some guys that we have not seen this series that I would like to. At the top of that list being KJ Martin and Ricky Council IV. Now, are those guys that are automatic series changers? Are those the secret weapon I expect to turn things around? Not completely, but what they are energy guys, and that is where the Knicks are absolutely destroying the Sixers team. KJ Martin is a guy that can just straight up match up with Josh Hart, prevent a great deal of those offensive rebounds, which is where the Sixers team is just getting destroyed. That if you cut out some of those offensive rebounding, and both these guys are big, athletic, and will compete and hunt for those loose balls, I give this team a much more fair shot. So I would like to see that. And for Nick Nurse specifically, it's time to dig in the bag. That we've seen what has worked and what hasn't. And I don't want to go down fighting with those being the same strategies that are tried. Give me a little run with somebody else. I even wouldn't mind. We've talked how much they've been crushed in the non-Joel Embiid minutes, a minus 38 in just 34 minutes of play, which is tough to do considering how dominant he has been for most of the time he's been on the floor. I would not mind running with a small ball unit during the period of time which Joel Embiid is off the floor and trying to play some 5-out basketball, trying to run and gun, trying to speed up the tempo of the play, because this Knicks team plays a slow and composed pace as well. So if you bring in Ricky Council IV, bring in KJ Martin, leave him with Tyrese Maxey, guys that want to run and gun, I can see there being a world where you can go on a little spurt that could ultimately provide the pathway to winning the Sixers game. Now, there's still a lot to be done in this series. Obviously, they're down 3-1. It takes 4 victories to advance this round. But they do have to take it one game at a time, and I'm not fully closing the door on the series yet. That history tells us that just 4.7% of teams who fall down 3-1 are able to climb themselves out of it. That feels about right for this specific situation. That 2 things can be true. That all 4 of these games have essentially been coin flips to this point. And that also makes me more pessimistic that they can secure 3 straight victories moving forward. And to kind of put a bow on the Tobias Harris conversation here, it sucks that this is the end of the Sixers tenure and this is how we're going to remember him. That I do think there have been more highs than is currently the case with Tobias Harris. But what I can't have is this dude just quitting on the team, and unfortunately, I fear that is what happened. And there is a moment that I did want to pull out where things really flipped in my mind and gave me some concern. We all remember the Joel Embiid dunk off the backboard, which was the highs and lows, the moment that encapsulates the career of Joel Embiid more so than anything. That he pulled off a play where maybe 5 NBA players in the entire planet can do, and then immediately went down grabbing his knee after. But what was interesting to me about that specific play, and I wish I could find a better angle than this, but you can still see what I'm talking about, is look at the reaction. Watch the way everyone explodes off the Sixers bench except Tobias Harris. So keep an eye on the top right corner here.
Goes up, throws it down, and lands.
That, to me, is a guy that looks over it. That, to me, is a guy that is not living and dying with the team. And to show it one more time, and again, this was everyone's reaction. That got me out of my seat watching this first try. But look at the reaction from everyone except Tobias Harris.
Goes up, throws it down, and lands.
Now, I'm not saying it's the end of the world, and I do hope that he can end on a high note. I would love nothing more than to eat every single one of these words and for Tobias Harris to put forth a 25.10 rebound performance. These Sixers could use that. But we also got to be realistic and think about what the best chance is for this team. And I don't know how much more evidence Nick Nurse needs to see to prove that that is not the case. So the Sixers are in a must-win spot, travel up to New York and looking to battle back from 3-1. Obviously, they are beat up, have some injury concerns. They just got to gut it out one game at a time. If that is the case, well, we're back in Philly for Game 6, and I expect a better crowd. I think I'm going to force myself in the building to make sure I'm there for that one. But they got to take care of business first. So if not, we will have plenty of content for the offseason. The grind will not be stopping here, but hopefully the Sixers give us a little more ball to talk about in the meantime. Appreciate everyone for tuning into this video here. Make sure you are smashing that subscribe button to help the Digest family keep growing. Dropping a like on this video and let me know any of your thoughts in the comments. And be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.